picture this. Christmas Eve, 1972. At approximately 7 p.m., a large, steamy bowl of spaghetti with clam sauce flew across our kitchen, aimed directly at my father, who had just moseyed in through the front door. Over an hour late and pretty tipsy from celebrating with his friends all afternoon. My mom was not happy. The spaghetti hit the wall at around 75 miles per hour, and my father ducked instinctively. My mom launched a giant salad bowl next. She had a pretty good arm in those days, but terrible aim, and our kitchen was beginning to look like the food fight scene from Animal House. My 80-year-old grandmother, on the other hand, just continued setting the table, completely unfazed by the whole thing. But my two sisters and I locked eyes. "Oh man," I muttered, "this sucks." Not because my mom threw our dinner at my father. We were used to that. Because it happened almost every frickin' Christmas Eve since I was 10. She never threw food on the other holidays, but Christmas was special. My father was always late, and my mother would always yell, "God damn it, Vinny!" And then he'd apologize, and we'd all sit down and eat. It was kind of our family tradition. The real reason I was bummed out was because my sisters and I were really looking forward to the spaghetti and clam sauce. We were a working class Italian family, and my mom could only afford to make it once a year. We loved it. Why couldn't she have thrown one of her other crappy side dishes this year? As Italian-American tradition dictates, every Christmas Eve, my mother and grandmother religiously prepared 7 different fish dishes. It's called the Feast of the 7 Fishes, and it's disgusting. Nobody knows why, but you have to have exactly 7 fishes, and if you don't, you'll burn in hell. Each fish was more repulsive than the next one. Boiled octopus, oily sardines with their little eyeballs looking at you, and anchovies on cream cheese that looked like somebody coughed up a plate of phlegm balls. Apparently, it's very expensive to make 7 fishes every year, and these were the cheapest fish my family could afford. Unfortunately, we were not the rich Italians. We were Napolitano, the poor ones. Our arch enemies, the Cardella family from across the street, were the rich Italians. They owned a jewelry store and were Siciliano. Every year, they had shrimp and lobster on Christmas Eve. They also had a built-in swimming pool. My family hated the Cardellas. So, there we were, my parents sucking down raw calamari like it was a salmonella contest, while my sisters and I were shoving 7 fishes into our pockets when no one was looking. Finally, it was time for dessert, except dessert in our house was just a boring bowl of fruit and some nuts. No cake, no cannoli, just fruit and nuts, which in hindsight seems an extremely accurate depiction of our family. That year, I made a snarky, smart remark at the table. "Mom, would it kill us to have a tiramisu once in a while?" And as soon as I said that, I broke my front tooth trying to crack open a Brazil nut. My grandmother shook her finger at me, yelling, "Oh, Madonna mia, Gesù Cristo malocchio," which means Jesus put a curse on me for being a little bitch. According to the Italians, the malocchio is the dreaded evil eye. And if you're on the receiving end of it, really bad stuff is going to keep happening to you until the curse is removed. The worst part is, with malocchio, you cannot remove the curse from yourself. You need a powerful Strega Nona, which means grandma witch in Italian. And they're very hard to find. Not just any slob can be a Strega Nona. Lucky for us, my grandmother was the best Strega Nona in town, and she was famous. People came from far and wide to seek her help. For example, when most people get a bad headache, you take an aspirin. When Italians get a bad headache, it's Maloicchio. You call Strega Nona. You got heartburn, you don't take Alka-Seltzer, you call Strega Nona. And if you lose $1,000 at the racetrack, you don't tell anybody, you call Strega Nona. It was a very lucrative little side hustle for my grandmother. Strega Nona is the most respected and feared member of the family, like Marlon Brando and The Godfather. The sacred ritual is passed down from generation to generation, but only shared with one beloved member of the family who Strega Nona deems is worthy enough. And it can only be passed down on one special night of the year, Christmas Eve. Every year we waited anxiously to see if my grandmother was finally ready to pass the torch. Every year she said the same thing, non ancora, not yet. But this year was different. Strega Nona raised her glass of wine and made her announcement. The new Strega Nona of the family would be Patrizia Mary. Holy shit, that's me! My own mother never became a Strega Nona because my grandmother never forgave her for not marrying a Siciliano. This could change my entire life. For a second, my 13-year-old self was drunk with power. Middle school payback was going to be a bitch when I learned how to do this thing. At precisely 10 p.m., Strega Nona brought me into the bathroom and locked the door. We needed absolute privacy, and this was the only room in our small house where we could go. She silently lit a candle, filled the sink with water, and sprinkled in a little salt. And then she slammed the toilet lid shut and told me to sit down. Not exactly the most mystical ambiance, especially since my father had just spent the last half hour in there after the fish. She poured 3 drops of olive oil in the water and twirled her rosary beads over the sink. Then she whispered a short prayer in Italian. But nothing happened. No earthquake, no bolt of lightning. The oil and water just sat there. Strega Nona twirled her rosary beads again and repeated the prayer, this time a little louder. Still nothing. You could cut the tension with a knife. She swung the beads one more time, and finally, whoosh, the water began to swirl. 3 drops of olive oil miraculously congealed together and formed one big blob. Grandma smiled. That was it? That's the whole thing? Honestly, I think she cheated and swished her finger around a little bit. Whatever. I stood at the sink while Grandma closed her eyes and took my hands. Patrizia, she said, now it's your turn to say the prayer. Grandma, I don't know the prayer, and I also don't know how to speak Italian. Vaffanculo, Patrizia, just say the Hail Mary, andiamo. So I did. And when we finished, she kissed me on the forehead and told me that I had been bestowed with a sacred responsibility. She also told me that I must never share this gift with anyone until I had a daughter of my own. Then she walked back to the kitchen. I stood over the sink by myself where the water and the oil was still sitting. I closed my eyes tightly and said another Hail Mary. If I really had become a Strega Nona, maybe, just maybe, my prayers would finally be answered. It wasn't immediate, of course, but sure enough, next Christmas Eve, 1973, for the first time in years, my father miraculously came home on time. My father came home, my mother didn't throw any food, the spaghetti and clam sauce was perfect, and a new Strega Nona was born.